This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
Before dawn of September 1st, 1939, clouds of bombers and fighters flew eastward into the skies over Poland, raining death and destruction on helpless towns and villages, on airfields, railroads, bridges, and factories. From East Prussia, Pomerania, Silesia, and Slovakia, gray-clad armies poured across the frontiers into the doomed country. The greatest of wars was on, a war which was, in the end, to involve the whole world in one vast conflagration. How did it happen that a generation still healing the deep wounds of the war of 1914–18 permitted this second and more terrible war to come? The explanation was to be found in the breakdown of the system of collective security and the growth of international anarchy, moral and political, in the post-World War I years. Across the seas, unappreciated by the average American, there had arisen a new threat to peace, to law, and ultimately to American security. This was totalitarianism, as expressed in the political organization of Italy, Germany, and Japan. The essence of totalitarianism was the subordination of all individual or social interests to the interests of the master race, as represented in the state. Its object, the division of the world into spheres of influence, each sphere to be controlled by a master nation. Its method, the ruthless use of force. Italy, under Benito Mussolini, had inaugurated the first totalitarian state in 1922. Adolf Hitler, who became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, improved greatly on the Italian model. Japan, long inured to despotism, fell increasingly under the control of reactionary military leaders who, with Emperor Hirohito's active compliance, ruthlessly suppressed all political opposition and preached the doctrine of Japanese racial superiority and the nation's sacred mission to free Asia of contaminating Western influences. Early in the 1930s, the first of these totalitarian nations felt strong enough to strike. Determined to establish its hegemony in the Far East, Japan invaded Manchuria in September 1931, crushed Chinese resistance, and a year later set up the puppet state of Manchukuo. The United States protested, and the League of Nations condemned the aggression, but Japan ignored the American protest, withdrew from the League, and prepared to extend its Asian conquests in order to end its economic dependence on white Western powers. The moral was not lost on other discontented nations. Throughout the 1920s, Germany had wrestled with the economic disorganization and social demoralization that followed its defeat in World War I, and the crisis was, by 1930, acute. German democracy seemed unable to cope with this crisis, but Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist, Nazi Party promised relief from economic ills, escape from the bondage of the Versailles Treaty, and the union of the entire German race under one strong government. In 1933, the aged president, Paul von Hindenburg, was persuaded to appoint Hitler, a transplanted Austrian and failed artist, to the chancellorship, and within a few months all opposition leaders were in jail, and the National Socialist Party had an iron grip on the political and military machinery of the country. Hitler moved swiftly to consolidate his position and implement his promises. Determined to make Germany the greatest military power in the world, he contemptuously withdrew from both the Geneva Disarmament Conference and the League of Nations, and embarked upon a full-scale program of rearmament. And, as if to dramatize his dissociation from the moral standards of the Western world, he invoked the discredited doctrine of Aryan superiority to justify a reign of terror against the Jews. Meanwhile, Mussolini, the founder of fascism, thought the time was now ripe to re-establish the Roman Empire of ancient days. Ethiopia, which blocked the way from Italian Libya to Italian Somaliland, seemed an easy victim to start on. Early in 1935, Mussolini persuaded the slippery French premier, Pierre Laval, to consent to an Italian conquest of Ethiopia, and during the winter of 1935–36 that conquest was consummated. Haile Selassie, the Ethiopian emperor, appealed to the League of Nations, but he was powerless to stop Italy.